Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Time Extend. My name's Adam Ismail, and joining me for this holiday-themed episode is...
Brendan Rodison, and can you believe it again, Adam? We're back on the Christmas cast this time. It's the second Christmas cast, and wow, what a year to recap.
Yeah, it's been a year, to put it mildly. You know, basically, we've talked a couple of times on a few different episodes about, you know, the games that have come out this year, and we even, you know, with the last episode kind of talking about a lot of the Codemasters games. Those were a big part of the year. So rather than just like kind of recount, you know, what 2020 was in racing games and stuff like that, we thought we would kind of throw it over to the community, throw it over to you guys, and Brendan, you put out this question on Twitter: what racing game helped you get through this trash pile of a year? Which is just, you know, perfectly worded. And yeah, what's been your most fun virtual racing experience? And the answers that we got are pretty awesome. I mean, just like all over the map, because it's not just so much like, you know, what did you play that came out this year? It's like literally, you know, what did you get into this year? Could be pretty much anything. And so there's a range of answers. And you know, I feel like early, like kind of the start of the year, before most of the releases came out, you know, I feel like you and I were also kind of digging back into old stuff because there just wasn't a whole lot new to play.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's one of the reasons why this topic is especially interesting, because I think the majority of us have ended up with more time on our hands than we would typically have. We'd usually be out socialising with friends or meeting family, but because of the big COVID, basically a lot of our kind of typical plans have fell to the wayside. So I think what's interesting is I don't think everybody will necessarily have visited their favourite games for the majority of this year, but rather either tried to find new experiences from older releases, got into more modern racers, or even, which is in my case what has happened, tried to get into the kind of sim racing side of things and give a bit more attention on that side of things. So it's really interesting because usually people can live kind of busy lives. They probably play games that work around that, whereas now we've had a lot of time this year to get stuck into various types of racing game, and I think the results from the tweet in terms of what people were sharing with us really illustrates how far and wide people have been searching to keep busy.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes me back to like kind of when the year started and the pandemic started, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to play like Need for Speed Underground, because like I just completely missed those games.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't get very far in them because I kind of lost interest pretty quickly. But yeah, it's one of the reasons why, you know, retro game sales and stuff, like it's so hard to find certain systems and stuff like that where like prices have gone up just because everyone's home, and you know, what are you gonna do other than dig into some video games? So yeah, with that said, can kind of just like start going through here. And one game that I want to highlight, because this is also become a big part of my 2020, at least pretty much from the fall onward, was this game, and it's from Frapskiller. Recommended it, and I've seen it from other folks too in this thread, so apologies if I can't find who else also gave this game a shout out. But Wreckfest is phenomenal, and I don't think we have ever talked about Wreckfest on the show. Brendan, have you played it?
Yeah, so I bought it on Steam. It was one of the first games that I purchased when I got my gaming PC, actually, because I think at the time that's when it had that like infinite delay cycle almost on console. Like it felt as if it was never actually going to come out. But yeah, it's one of those games where I've played it. I think I've only put about 6 or 7 hours into it, but I remember really enjoying it, but for some reason I've never quite went back.
Yeah, so I feel like for me, it's a kind of game that I got into at the perfect time in the perfect way. And what I mean by that was like, I wasn't going through playing the builds of the game when it was like wasn't it like Kickstarted or something like that? Like
Yeah.
it was, it had like a green light process. Like I wasn't around for any of that because I never played the flat out games. It was never really my thing. So I missed all of the kind of ugly delayed parts and literally just got into the game this year. Where, it's been out for like 2 or 3 years now. It's been probably like 2 years. It's been like very, at this point, very polished. And I think that's actually the thing that shocked me the most is like for like an independent release. The game's obviously had a long time to get to this point, but I find it's like extremely polished and just fell in love with the physics. I mean, the way that I've been playing this game has been with 2 friends of mine, and we'll pretty much just create lobbies and race against mostly bots. Sometimes we'll do destruction derbies, which are fun as well. But yeah, just grab a couple of friends and fill up a room with bots, and like that game is just so much fun. You just end up in these like ridiculously stupid situations. It's just you're always laughing. You're always just there's always a moment in every single race or every event where you're just like, how did I get up there? How did I end up in this state? Like it's hilarious. And then that's all on top of the game that just handles like really well and drives really well and plays really well. And that's the thing that like floors me about Wreckfest is just like how physically sound it is, which makes sense given the history of of like where that game came from and the franchise. It's Bugbear, right?
Yeah,
like that's the name of the studio. Yeah. And just when it comes to things like soft body physics and stuff like that, like they've been around forever, so it makes sense. But I think for me, for a newcomer, it's really impressive. And so some of the absolutely absurd like special events that they've thrown in, like one of them, you're in this like battle bus and it's literally like traffic checking from Burnout Revenge, and you just like try and destroy as many cars as possible in a certain amount of time. And it just has to put a smile on your face. It's just one of those games. So I've really enjoyed Wreckfest, and right now it's like, because it's been out for a while, it's pretty cheap, so definitely worth snagging a copy of that if you haven't yet.
Yeah, it's one of those games as well. I don't think I've heard much, if any, negatives from people. Like whenever people talk about Wreckfest, they're always very very happy with what it offers, and it's almost an unassuming title in that regard. I think that it's one of those games that for a lot of people might be, oh yeah, I'll get round to playing Wreckfest, or in my case, kind of dabble in it and then kind of forget about it for one reason or another. But now it feels like I have to go back and see it, because it was pretty recurring in this thread. There was a good few people who talked specifically about Wreckfest, and then there was even others where they're talking about other games and then they throw in at the end also Wreckfest, because it's just so much fun. The kind of supportive content's been great. So yeah, I think I was very surprised to see Wreckfest trend so much in everybody's responses, but also happy to see that, because I have heard nothing but good things about the game, so it's good to see.
It's funny that it just kind of happened that way, where a bunch of us discovered it at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of strange, but Wreckfest is good. Go check it out. Brendan, is there one you want to highlight?
Yeah, so this one was posted by Rhino and Hayden James in the comments. It's probably one that I prefaced earlier that I might talk about, but basically these guys were talking about iRacing and how that was a big part of the year. And I thought this would be interesting to talk about purely from a looking back at 2020 perspective, because we obviously had that sim racing boom out of nowhere when COVID stopped kind of all sporting events, and that meant that motorsport also couldn't happen. And then all of a sudden, sim racing, for all its warts and glory, was like thrown into the spotlight for this is what's going to replace the kind of core content. And I just thought it'd be interesting to bring this up, just to think about some of the insane things that happened related to sim racing this year because of iRacing. Like obviously all the NASCAR drivers and stuff getting involved, Um, the Pagano Norris battle as well.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
All the drivers that like lost their jobs because they said or did things on
God,
stream.
yeah.
Nah,
Yeah, I mean that as well. It's not all funny stories. We learned that some people, the scumminess can rise to the surface if they're not in their pampered PR environments. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while here for sim racing, and I feel as if iRacing kind of embodied all of that. Like I feel as if between that and the Formula One series, those kind of titles took the brunt of where people were guiding their views once real motorsport stopped. And I mean, for me personally, like it's been exciting to see that grow alongside me even being interested in iRacing, because I think I've said before, I tried it a few years ago and I just couldn't stand the thing. But with all this kind of extra time on my hands and trying to find a way to kind of keep busy, it makes sense that you gravitate towards this service. I know there's a lot of kind of controversial feelings about iRacing out there, but in terms of trying to make your hobby, which is basically a waste of time, feel like it's worthwhile, like iRacing does a good job of kind of providing all the bells and whistles that kind of bring you back from a motorsport perspective, obviously not from a game design perspective, but it's not trying to offer that. So it's one of these things where it was always exciting, for example, looking at the race schedule and seeing when races started and getting prepped to join those. I can't say for many racing games in modern times I remember my first race, but I still remember my first race on iRacing like it was yesterday, because it was one of the strangely most anxious experience I've ever had, and it was just purely because you kind of buy into the idea that this is a super serious sim, mostly because of the price you're fucking paying. But like, iRacing for me just captures something that 2020 sort of needed, and it's that hyper-realistic simulation that was able to, even for a temporary period of time, bring in an audience of people who maybe only watched proper motorsport and actually kind of dabble in the virtual realm. And by the looks of it, in terms of articles that's come out and the kind of growth in subscriber rate as well, it seems like 2020 was a year, or at least half of 2020 was the time where iRacing like flourished again and kept growing bigger and bigger. For to refer it back to the guys who were talking about it, for Rhino, I mean he was streaming iRacing all the time. Him and his Team Rick did the Le Mans 24-hour race, which was fun to watch. Alongside it was Rhino did it with Mr. Aero HD as well, another follower on the account, and a good Twitch streamer, and some other guys. And it was just fun watching that 24-hour race in iRacing, because even though I know it's always been there, I've never actually looked at it before, so that was new for me this year watching that. It was very exciting. And then on the other side of the coin, Hayden James was talking about the fact that he just got into iRacing and managed to win his first race, and he posted a little clip of the race itself. And it is a very proud moment. Like when I managed to win mines, I was just flabbergasted that I had done it, purely because I don't win online in most games, like, at all. So when it happened in iRacing, I was just blown away, especially the manner in which it happened. I think I've talked about it in the Discord, but basically it was like an MX-5 Cup race at Lime Rock, 15 laps.
Such a great track.
Yeah, oh, fantastic. And once again, It's a track I would have never played if it wasn't for iRacing, but like,
exactly,
it's so fucking good, man. Amazing track. So it was like a 15 lap sprint race, and I qualified like 10th out of like 18 cars or whatever, so I was like, you know what, stay steady, finish halfway up the pack, I'll be happy. And for like 10 of the laps I managed to stay in that like 7th, 8th position. And then in classic rookie MX-5 Cup fashion, there was a massive wreck ahead of me at the kind of the chicane, and everybody like, must have got caught in this in some regard. Some cars were flipped upside down, some were in the wall, some had managed to dodge the crash but were skidding in the dirt, and just coasted. I just coasted right through them and straight into first, and then trying to hold my mettle for those last 3 laps. Like, I had an Apple Watch at the time, because I had an iPhone at the time of this race, and like it triggered the "Are you exercising?" thing because of the heart rate.
Oh
because
my god!
I was so nervous, man. Like, I'm not kidding. It was just like such a watershed moment. Like, holy shit, I've got a chance to win this race. And it's one of those things that looking back on it, it sounds so ridiculous for what is basically a slightly more realistic racing game. But there's just something about iRacing, and I can never quantify it, but it makes you believe that it's an actual motorsport like arena. So
yeah, I'm totally there
there
with you, man. Like
yeah.
it's been a long time since I played iRacing. I probably last played that game in like 2012 or something like that. So I want to get back into it, and actually, I'm going to be testing some sim racing equipment and stuff coming up this year for my job, which is exciting. So I will have every reason to go dig back into iRacing again, and I want to, because everyone, it has become this institution. Like everyone I know has played it, kind of regardless of whether or not. I mean, obviously you have the hardcore sim crowd, but the fact that you're into it, the fact that so many people in the Time Extend community who play, you know, Ridge Racer and Gran Turismo and all the other games that are like, you know, quote unquote, you know, less realistic or whatever, or just like the full on arcade racers, like they play it, like everyone plays it, and it's a cool place to be. It isn't so much the kind of thing that I naturally gravitate towards, because like, yeah, I definitely feel that pressure. Like when I played that game I did, and I'm reminded of when I was at the Gran Turismo thing last year, and I just did the I did like the Pro-Am race or whatever, and literally like my arms and legs were shaking. I was so nervous. And you know, that's an extreme case, because I'm driving against other people who I'm in the same room as, and you know, I'm at a big production and everything, but like it terrifying. When I was saying in that seat, it took me right back to like my first race in iRacing, and just being like horrified in the MX5 Cup and doing something stupid. And I think I don't exactly remember where I finished, but I know it was at Okayama, and I know it was like, you know, something like middle of the pack. So yeah, but that's a cool thing about iRacing too, is that like it makes you, I imagine when you get that win, it's got to feel incredible. But even when you just have a good race, you know, and you don't win, or you don't get like top 3 or top 5, you maybe start in the back, you pick up some positions, like it just feels good. You're just satisfied with yourself. And I imagine the more you do that, the more you can kind of keep your heart rate in check, and go in kind of cool-headed. I never got to that point, but that's what I'm hoping anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently up to a B license now, and it's funny, whenever I kind of turn it on and do like a session in the GT3 cars and stuff, it is pretty funny thinking like 6 months ago I was absolutely terrified of like an MX5 Cup car, and then like you're in these kind of the GT3 LMS Audi R8 and stuff, and like you just feel as if you're at home, like you just slot straight into it, and you get to work almost. Like it doesn't feel as if it's a sudden like challenge just driving the car. It's more about getting it to be fast. Obviously it depends what category of cars you go in, because I suppose the whole point of a GT3 cars is they're supposed to be ridiculously easy to drive. But even still, when I think back to the first time I drove that MX5, and then the first victory in that car as well, like you were saying, like the feeling when you get that first win, like I literally like sprung up and yelled. Like I was so happy to get it over the line. It didn't matter, like in most racing games, if that kind of crash happened and I won, my immediate thought would have been, oh well, that's good, I managed to get a win because they all messed up. But that's racing at the end of the day, like it happens in real motorsport as well.
Yeah.
So for some reason, when it happened in iRacing, my attitude was totally different, and being able to kind of seal it and clinch the deal, it was just such a relieving thing, because even the person in second that had also managed to weave through, once we get through and I was in first and he was in second, I think the gap was like 7 seconds, and by the end of the race it was like 4.5 or 3. I think it was 3.5, because I was being so cautious to make sure I got it over the line.
Sure.
So once the priority shifts and you're in the lead like that, it's hard to. It was a feeling I'd never had before, because in most sims online I'm never really leading the pack. So see, being forced into that situation, that was still challenging in its own right. Whereas I think in a lot of other games and stuff, once you kind of get into first, it's more of the kind of same. But for some reason in iRacing, just from a mental point of view, it becomes so much more of a challenge. So I don't want to talk about iRacing for the rest of the podcast, but I felt as if from a perspective of the title having an influence on 2020, I'd say it was one of the biggest players from a sim point of view in terms of getting people exposed, having some drivers exposed to be dickish as well, and also just from a newbie beginner perspective, from like myself and like Hayden James as well in the chat, in the tweet, I was amazed at how quickly I just got into it, given that for most racing games that I played, I'm not really that bothered about the online, but like because in iRacing that is the main event, like
That's
you just treat it with exactly, you treat it with so much more attention, and it's for me I felt as if it deserved to be called out because it's definitely had an influence on the year.
Yeah, of course, and it's as you say, it's symbolic, for the year that we've had. So that's great. Yeah, maybe one day I'll join you. I'll have to get up to your level, your driver level B or whatever. But give me time.
So what's your next choice then?
I actually wanted to highlight something that isn't necessarily a game real quick. Okay. Daniel Ricci. His response to this tweet was, he says, "Not playing racing games much this year, but I swear TG was a blast and a really big relief, even if it lasted just an evening." Yeah, thank you for calling that out, man. TG was a lot of fun, and we need to figure out a way to do that again, because it was a really good time, and I think. We tried to do it again with Project Cars. It's tough when it's a game that not everyone has.
Yeah.
What was beautiful about the TG situation, which if you're listening to this and you don't know, I think it was like in April or May, we had a 40 car race on Grid 2019 via Stadia, because Stadia was free for like 3 months of the year, and we were able to fill up the lobby. It was an absolute shit show because, it's a Stadia game, and, people were teleporting in and out of each other. And I think somebody set, we did qualifying. Somebody set a hot lap of like 0.232 seconds around the Red Bull ring. Like, none of it made sense, but we were all laughing. Brendan, you got kicked a number of times.
I got suspended as well, whatever
suspended.
That means. I've still never seen that error message in Grid ever since. I want to know what I did. See, just like hearing about this again, like it's hard like not to get even a tiny bit emotional, just purely because like that was one of those things, like you said, it wasn't like this massively orchestrated event that we had planned or anything. It was more of like a natural beast that just kind of grew into its own thing. We weren't like actively pushing for people to join in or trying to like force it upon people and that type of thing, or make it this big event with a prize.
Yeah, I mean we put the call out, but people just naturally gravitated towards it, and it didn't. All the people who said they were going to come through came through, and the ones who couldn't, there were other people who were willing to play along, and yeah, it was an awesome time, and I'm thankful for everybody who participated or watched it, or even just watched some of the videos some of those guys put together after the fact, which are absolutely hilarious. Just kind of distilling the half hour of just crap into bite-sized form, the suspensions, the teleporting. It was a shit show, but obviously, we're doing a race on Stadia. We knew that was going to happen. That was the point, and it just, I think everybody got a big kick out of it, and that just makes me really happy to think about. It's a good thing that happened in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. When the player counter reached 40, like, I think even the people who thought they were going to be kind of relatively well behaved and kind of neutral about the whole thing, as soon as it hit 40 players, like the chat just exploded into screaming and random nonsense, because it was like, holy shit, we've done it.
Yeah, I think Chris has a video, right? Yeah, so Racer XNFS on YouTube has a video, the Great Stadia Disaster. I know there are others. I'm actually going through. I'm going through the server to see, like the TG server, to see what videos there are out there. But definitely go check that out. It was a good time. But I think what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to do that again. I just don't know how we get there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. Like, once it finished, the immediate thought was, like you're saying, I just love to do that again. It was incredible fun. It's one of these things where, like, Stadia was the butt of every single joke, but ironically, it was the one platform and one scenario that could have probably made that so easy to pull off.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the wild part about it, and I'm just looking back at the server myself now and looking at like the last message that I sent to everybody in the chat before the lobby was about to open. I'm just going to read an excerpt from it because it's so funny looking back at it. This is it, the biggest organised shithouse of 2020. The only coronavirus could make a possibility. You could have been out tonight, getting pished in a bar, pub or club, or actually just seeing friends. Yet, Stadia is love, Stadia is life.
Oh my god, that's perfect.
It's great to read that reply because it's been fucking a crazy year, obviously. I don't know how many times it needs to be said, but that was one of those moments. It was like, even in terms of people's availability, would that have happened any other year? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. I also like, fuck your esports, this is time extend sports.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I think a good, the best way to do that would be some kind of cross-platform racing game that, you know, has kind of cross-platform multiplayer. Unfortunately, thinking about it, I feel like our only option is like Forza. You can't really have something on that scale, and Forza Horizon isn't really good for it. But that's the one everyone has, so that would probably be the best option. Forza Motorsport 7, maybe, but if anyone's listening to this and has ideas of how they think we might be able to pull this off, we'd love to hear them because we want to do it again. And unfortunately, outside of the people who forgot that they had their Stadia subscription lapse past the 3 trial months, outside of those people who were very disappointed to pay for Stadia, like actually pay for Google Stadia, the rest of us, I think, got rid of our subscriptions. So
I feel so bad. Like, the whole thing was advertised on the premise it was free, and I think like 50% of everybody that did it ended up getting stung for like £10.
The funny thing about that, though, is ironically, it has become one of the only consistent ways to play Cyberpunk if you don't have a new console.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Hey, you get something out of it.
Exactly.
All right, what's your next one?
Right, so trying to bring it back to games again and just seeing some of the games here that perhaps I wouldn't expect to see. So, Drive Club actually appeared a few times throughout the tweets, including one from Dr. Driller, Say of the Sun as well. So, the Drive Club I found interesting purely because everybody that really likes that game's probably already played it by now. It's like one of those games where it's got a bit of a kind of cult following almost, that eventually you probably gave in prior to 2020 and gave it a go despite the fact that it's now dead, God rest its soul. What's interesting is that Say of the Sun says on Twitter that they actually owned the game for years, but not until listening to Time Extend did they ever actually play it and give it a go. And now, as a result, it's one of the best racing games they've ever played, and it's at least in their top 5 favourites of all time. So
you love to see it.
You do love to see it, exactly.
Yep.
That's why I wanted to bring it up. Like, no matter what 2020 has thrown at us, like, Drive Club remains supreme. Like that somebody out there can experience Drive Club for the first time, or they were kind of playing it before the servers went kaput as well and got that last fill of competitive online racing on it. And yeah, I just feel as if we have so many options now, and yet Drive Club still remains a consistent, and I think that's going to be the case for a good few years to come. Now, I think for every new racing game that comes out, there'll always be those few people that say, oh, that reminds me of Drive Club, or oh, I wish it had something like Drive Club, and then the uninitiated will see it and be like, I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah, I do feel like part of the reason that Drive Club maybe was revisited this year was because this was pretty much the last chance that everyone had to play it before it was taken down, at least before the multiplayer servers were taken down.
Yeah.
That is such a big factor of that game's appeal. I mean, look, I played through the whole single-player campaign Drive Club and had a blast. Yeah, it is a checklist of events, but that game is just so much fun that I didn't care. But the online experience was what really sealed the deal. I mean, just going into the hoppers, doing those races, having your selection of like a couple races every day, hopping into them with your friends. It was just a great time. And if Time Extend is remembered for anything, I hope it's that we converted people to Drive Club. because since day one, you and I have been saying, you know, that game never got the fair shake it deserved. And I think people are finally starting to see that now. I think they're starting to come around to the idea that there's just something about that game, about just the way it feels and the way it looks, the atmosphere of it. And unfortunately, you won't get to experience, you know, the whole factor of beating your friends' times and stuff like that, doing drift challenges and whatnot. But I think maybe you can kind of get, you can still, if you play the game now, you can get what they were going for, and you could see how a game like that would really come alive online, because it did. I mean, I was addicted to, especially when they were like in that cycle of releasing new content that was really great every single month. And any issue that you had with the game, at least when it was like in like kind of post development in that stage, was ultimately solved. I mean, it launched with the online issues it had. Obviously, those were thankfully stamped out eventually. They added the weather. One of my gripes was that I wasn't really digging the car roster, and then they came around and added so many like great old classic legendary cars like the F40, the F50, the Diablo, the McLaren F1. They added amazing new locales that were, you know, I mean, most of the time I was playing Drive Club, Canada was probably my favorite, but then once Japan came out, I don't know. I mean, it's such a toss-up, and that game just kept getting better and better and better. And yeah, I just hope as many people as possible get to play it somehow. And you know, I think if you do play it, you can see that if you could just play this game on PS5. I mean, you know, you can via backwards compatibility, but like, imagine if this game got the resolution, or rather the frame rate bump that PS4 games get on PS5. If it had an uncapped frame rate, I mean, Jesus Christ, that's gonna be the best racer of 2021 right there.
Yeah, I just like you said, all the features of that game. I don't think we've ever seen anything else get close to being such an integrated, seamless experience. Like, it's hard to explain, but the way Drive Club does it puts all the onus on these social elements of the game, but also doesn't make it the centre of attention. And that's such a paradox. But what I basically mean is, when you consider how other racing games kind of integrate the multiplayer side of things, they always make it the kind of the star of the show, centre of attention. But I felt as if Drive Club was able to kind of integrate it and seamlessly kind of thread it into the racing experience that was first and foremost. And I think that's something that people won't probably be able to experience to its fullest now. But like you said, what Drive Club is from this point onward now is basically a proof of concept for something that once was. So if you haven't had the chance to experience what Drive Club was and what it could have evolved to become even further, then it's worth a look. I think I've kind of dreamed about it on the Time Extend Twitter account. Like, can you imagine a Drive Club 2 on PlayStation 5 with like OS level leaderboards and activity cards for launching events? Like, the PS5 OS has basically just ripped the best parts of Drive Club and put it across all of the PlayStation games. So like Drive Club 2 would have integrated into that so easily with clubs as well, that type of thing, because the way the PlayStation 5 can opt for voice chat, it tries to put people in groups much like a Discord server. Like those groups could have been drive clubs within the game. Like there's just so many ways it could have been like, kind of threaded into the PS5 architecture, and it's a shame that we'll never get to see the series grow in that way. All the same, it's still fantastic to see people first experiencing it in 2020 or having their last fill of the game at its full potential.
Yeah, and I think to your point about how the game both, was so invested in the online experience but didn't make it the focus, I think the reason that Drive Club worked really well in that regard is because so many racing games really try to push it on you. Yeah. But there's never a feeling when you're playing Drive Club. I mean, I remember when that game came out, the first thing I did wasn't go online. The first thing I did was probably do like the regular single player campaign. But it just kind of sprinkles these things in there, like it'll sprinkle in the leaderboards, and then you notice that like one of your friends has a game, you'll see their time. And basically like the game and Evolution Studios had the confidence that like the player will get there. They will find their way to the online. They'll figure it out and they'll get it. We don't have to push it. We don't have to make it the center of attention. It will make sense. Just let people play the game the way they want to play, and they'll figure it out and they'll find it. And I think that's a kind of confidence in your game design that like really, really stands out. And in a game like Drive Club, I mean, it just takes it to the next level. But yeah, as it is now, we're just gonna be talking about this game forever, and just in this tone of like, wish you could have been there, man.
I mean,
you had to be there.
We got the Wipeout Omega collection when Studio Liverpool was deceased, so perhaps if there's enough shouting, we could get Drive Club on the PS5. I mean, don't get me wrong, it'll be a licensing nightmare.
Well, now that Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remastered has proven that licensed racing games can be remastered and re-released, exactly. It's possible, Now we'll get that remaster of Gran Turismo 2, obviously.
Of course.
Yeah. Always good to talk about Drive Club. I'm sure it will come out. I'm sure Drive Club will be a factor every single time we have a discussion like this in the future, because it's basically synonymous with Time Extended at this point.
Yeah. In no part as well due to racing madness, it must be pointed out. I think we had equal parts of people hyped about Drive Club making a long run in that bracket, and those that were absolutely perplexed by it, who were wrong, by the way.
I totally forgot that it made it to the final round. Yeah, that was absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So pleased to see it. The Drive Club, the Drive Club family just like rose up, and Drive Club gang went right up to Need for Speed Most Wanted. Didn't get there, but I mean, of course, who could? That game was a juggernaut. So.
Yeah, and a certain Black Panther also done his flag waving for Most Wanted as well.
He actually, I have to find it. So he actually responded to this tweet as well.
Oh, nice.
I think. I could have sworn I saw it.
I found it here.
Okay.
It's big up Need for Speed and the crew for as always for holding me for most of the year. I'm most surprised by the reference to the crew there, to be honest. That is not something I would expect to read this year. I don't know why.
Yeah, so I feel like we have to maybe... I think the crew is a game that we should talk about one day, because, I mean, what I've played of the crew 2 I did not like. And I don't know how much of the crew, either the first or second game, you've experienced, Brendan.
Never.
But the people who like it really like it, and there's a conscious decision there to like. I guess it's kind of the reason why I like sort of respect it at this point, even though I really didn't like the game, is because you could play Forza Horizon 4 or 3 or any of the Horizon games, which like. I feel like, objectively speaking, is a better game. I don't really know how you could argue with that. And I'm not even obviously, like, I'm not a huge Horizon fan. Everybody who's listened to a podcast knows that. But I still think, like, technically, objectively speaking, it's pretty sound, pretty reliable. But something draws people to the Crew as opposed to Horizon, and I kind of want to know what that is. I mean, they're not exactly the same, obviously. You know, they're not complete stand-ins for each other, but yeah, people keep going back to the Crew. It's got a fan base. I wonder if they're working on a new one.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things for all kind of the bad things that are said about Ubisoft. They have a surprisingly good track record for supporting titles. Like, I don't know how popular the Crew is beyond its core fan base, but that game still gets content updates all the time pretty much. And then the example I always go to was how like Steep as well was supported up until like the end of last year. I mean, that must have been like 4 or 5 people still playing that game at that point. And then even like, it isn't a direct sequel in the case of Steep, but the other kind of extreme sports game it's coming out in early 2021 is definitely just Steep kind of cranked up to 11. And it's the same with the Crew. Like, I'd be very surprised if they aren't making a third one, purely because like Ubisoft are just really consistent at supporting titles and series that aren't just the kind of Rainbow Six Siege and that type of thing.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is the support, because that can really transform the game. I mean, we were just talking about Drive Club. Drive Club was heavily supported for that year. Forza Horizon is still supported with, you know, the new kind of hard to get car every couple of weeks. That can absolutely kind of lengthen the game's life, and so power to Ubisoft for doing it. I do wish I liked the game more, but I'm glad that the people who are digging it are still in there.
Yeah, I think the thing that's always intrigued me about it is the fact that it includes real world race circuits as well in the open world. I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So, I'm going through. There is one tweet that really surprised me, because I kind of went through and was like looking for the most kind of the rarest game, or like the most unexpected game. I wouldn't expect somebody to say like I got back into this in 2020, because there's a lot of like, I played all the Ridge Racers, I played all the Gran Turismos, which obviously, like, of course you should. Those are amazing games. No one says you shouldn't. But I was surprised by this one from Chalk It Down, who said, Rally Sport Challenge 2 on the original Xbox. What a game that is. Also played a bunch of Drive Club, so there's Drive Club again. And lately he's been playing Dirt 5 on PS4. I wanted to highlight Rally Sport Challenge 2. Because again, this is a game that, and a franchise, I mean, there were only 2 games in the franchise, but this is a thing that we never really talked about on Time Extend, and it is worth discussing, because these were 2 really good games from a time when Microsoft's biggest racing franchises were PGR and this. I mean, even before Forza. Rally Sport Challenge 1, it wasn't a launch title, but it came out really close to the beginning of that system. And they're just great games. You can go back and play. I think I don't think they're backwards compatible on Xbox One or anything, but fortunately I have a 360 at my parents' house. And so when I go there, I can put Rally Sport Challenge 1 in, and it plays well enough. The 360 backwards compatibility is not the best in the world, but so good. Have you ever gotten a chance to play either of those games?
No, so it's one of those ones that's definitely on my list. I've kind of dabbled in it through a family member having an original Xbox, but I think I've said before that since I didn't have one of those initially, it took me ages to finally get into Project Gotham Racing. But right. Rally Sport Challenge, obviously a bit rarer than that, you would say, is fair. I think it's definitely one of the series we need to consider for a future episode. I think that goes for quite a lot of titles as well, but I think Rally Sport Challenge definitely deserves an in-depth look, because I'm always obsessed by the fact it was it DICE that developed this?
It was DICE, yeah, it was DICE.
So and I find that very interesting.
And DICE, were they responsible for Midtown Madness as well, or am I making that up? Let's find out.
For some reason I think that's bizarre, but I think I
No, it's not bizarre. It is DICE. It's DICE
Yeah,
and a
it's
company
DICE.
called Infusio, which I have never heard of before. Yeah, so yeah, this is part of the days before, DICE going to EA doing Battlefield, when they just made a lot of racing games like this. And Midtown Madness isn't strictly a racing game. It's, this weird open world thing, but
yeah.
yeah, they were so good when they were working on those games. Like Rally Sport Challenge is interesting because at a time when you basically had Colin McRae that was doing the hardcore rally sim, the hardest hardcore rally sim you were going to get back in the early 2000s. V Rally, which was like sort of trying to do that, but also usually more forgiving, not really as polished. Those games were okay, but they weren't fantastic. What else did you have? I mean, you had the Codemasters series, but that really didn't get going. The first one wasn't very good. Sorry, not Codemasters. You had the Evolution Studios WRC series. That really didn't get going until like the second or third game, though.
Richard Burns Rally as well.
Yeah, Richard Burns, but then you need the actually no that's the interesting thing about RBR is that didn't come out on console in this country.
Oh,
But I know
right.
it did over there.
Yeah, it came out on the Xbox
And
here.
I think that's a reason why a lot of people, at least in the US, have not played Richard Burns Rally. Because, like, yeah, without a PC, there was no way to experience it. And it's such an important game in that genre.
Yeah, 100%. I managed to get it working on the gaming PC, and I'm still stunned at how it pretty much holds up in every regard outside of the kind of the dated visuals from a driving perspective. But it's so interesting in the US that it must have been a lot harder to come by and actually experience.
Yeah, I am pretty certain this game did not get an American release on console. Funnily enough, I'm on Wikipedia and it says it came out for the Gizmondo, which if you don't know what the Gizmondo is, it was a vaporware PSP. So if you want to play a game like Richard Burns Rally on a system that is like the PSP but worse in every single way, it probably would go about as well as you'd expect. But yeah, those were kind of all of the rally games that were around at that time. And then out comes Rally Sport Challenge. I mean, to me, it was sort of out of nowhere. I was obviously pretty young, but that was a new IP. Coming from a studio that was not one that I had ever encountered before. So that was kind of my introduction to Digital Illusions, and was just amazed by that was one of those games that really used the power of the Xbox well. Like, that really demonstrated, like, here's why the Xbox is, the lead system for this generation. Because between the damage model and the physics and how fast that game moved and the environments, there's a funny thing that happens in Rally Sport Challenge where, like, if you... There is a boundary to the stages, but it's not like it's not like a hard fence or an invisible fence or anything like that. Basically, like, if you're in, say, like one of the desert stages, you can go out for a while and then the game will just, like, you'll get that white flash and you'll end up back, reset to the pathway. But there's a funny thing that can happen where, like, if you veer off and you, I don't know, roll your car or something like that, the camera will just pan out and just you'll be able to take in, like, in replay fashion, your car as it is just disintegrating in real time before your eyes. And it was just such a, like, kind of movie effect for a game that I didn't, I was just surprised that there was this new rally game out that I didn't know about. That wasn't Sega Rally, wasn't Colin McRae, wasn't any of those franchises that kind of came out of nowhere. And luckily it got a sequel. And those games were, it was weird because it was one of those things where, like, almost like in a grid way, like, it was realistic in as much as the damage could be punishing and, like, the situations you could get yourself in the rallies and, like, on stages were punishing. But the game itself, like, the physics were pretty arcadey. the stages were pretty wide. I remember actually some of the rallies in that game, they would put 4 cars on a point-to-point stage, which was sort of weird.
Yeah.
But that's how they do it. So in some ways it was pretty arcadey, but in other ways it was actually relatively realistic for the time. And then you also had all the different disciplines. You had ice racing, you had rallycross. The rallycross in that game was so good. So, yeah, Rally Sport Challenge is a great one. That is a series I miss.
We need to do a deeper dive on it for sure. I want to experience this because, as you know, I absolutely adore rally games. So the fact that I haven't had the chance to go kind of properly hands on with this one, it always makes me feel as if I'm missing out.
Yeah, I'd actually like to highlight something. I saw this today. It is from a magazine. I don't know what magazine it is, but I get the sense that this is like an article, or not an article, but like a snippet that kind of has made its way around the web for a while. Somebody just randomly on Twitter shared it, but it's from some magazine, and it's basically a letter that somebody seems to have sent into this magazine. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, Brendan, but it's titled "Son Finds His Father's Ghost Waiting for Him in Vintage Rally Game." Yeah, I haven't seen this before. This was the first time I came across it. Yeah, this person is just like, when I was 4, my dad bought an Xbox. We had tons and tons of fun playing all kinds of games together until he died when I was just 6. I couldn't touch the console for 10 years. Once I did, I noticed something. We used to play a game called Rally Sports Challenge. Once I started meddling around, I found a ghost. Of course, it was his father's ghost, and he said that he played it, did that time trial over and over and over again until he passed his dad, and then stopped right before the finish line because he didn't want to leave the ghost. So
it's a brilliant story.
Yeah, that's the kind of bittersweet, warms your heart story that I see those about lots of other games. Like I see those about Zelda and shit like that. It's cool. Crossing. It's cool that it's about Rally Sport Challenge.
of all the racing games that you could imagine that story being about, I think that that's the beauty of that story in itself. Like it was a very specific experience that this guy and his dad had. Yeah. Played the Xbox. You got to admire that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Glad that one of the good things that Twitter can do is circulate stuff like that, in addition to the nonsense that it usually circulates.
Yeah, I kind of contribute to that, so I apologize.
All right, so we wanna highlight maybe one more.
Yeah, let's go for one more. So I've had a look around, and the last one I want to discuss. It's kind of a toss-up between pretty much the biggest racing games of this year, because as we talked about at the start of the podcast, we've kind of covered these games as they've come out, so we don't really have to kind of do a thorough deep dive on them. But I also feel as if, just in terms of looking at where racing games as a whole is in 2020 and who might have been the leader in providing the best virtual experience in a racing game, Formula 1 2020 appeared a few times, and I just basically wanted to discuss that one purely because I think we talked about it in the last pod as well, but the fact that Formula 1 really hit its stride this year, in the exact same year that Codemasters has now been acquired by EA, I think it's just a positive note to end on, purely because we're seeing a motorsport simulation of the kind of the biggest racing series, you could say, finally reach its potential. And it's going to be interesting to see how in the future, 2021 and beyond, how other developers might look at the My Team mode and see how they can incorporate something similar in their racing games.
Yeah, and it's also got me thinking that we don't have to launch into the whole EA discussion again because we already had a show about that, but it does kind of have me wondering, would this deal have happened when it did if the pandemic didn't? Because just with all of the interest on sports getting back up again around the world, honestly, way sooner than they probably ever should have, although we do know that at least motorsports is one of those sports that is a little bit easier to do that with, because you can kind of have an enclosed bubble that travels to places that aren't necessarily hotspots. But even so, there was a lot of desire for F1 to kick back up again. And then we saw that reflected before that in, as we were saying before, the esports and people playing that game, racing drivers playing that game, streaming it. I just wonder if COVID in a weird way presented the perfect storm for F1 to reach this next level. And there was a part of me, I mean, it probably would have happened eventually, but I wonder if COVID didn't happen, would EA have stepped in when they did, put up the money that they did? I don't know. It's something that did not cross my mind last episode, but I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it all ties into what we're talking about on the iRacing front as well. Like, the value of racing games was shown again this year when it had to kind of fill in for a lack of real motorsport going on, and people's interest in the genre has seemingly become a bit more peaked this year. And momentum wise going into 2021, there's a potential that we could have Gran Turismo 7 and the next Forza Horizon. Seemingly that seems as if it's closer than Forza Motorsport, which is baffling, but a discussion for another day. So whilst like Formula 1 is the success story that seemingly made this buyout happen, I think across the racing game genre next year there's reasons to be excited. I'm sure some of those reasons haven't even been announced yet as well. And yeah, it'll be interesting, like we talked about last time, to see if EA's acquisition starts a bit of a turf war with more kind of bigger name publishers or even the console manufacturers themselves to try and get a piece of the pie.
Next year seems like it's really going to be a big year for racing games. I mean, maybe that's kind of where we end this discussion, because you and I have gone back and forth. I wanted to believe so bad that GT7 was going to be a spring game. It looks more and more likely that it is not a spring game. But I still think it's going to come out in 2021. It's probably just going to be, holiday season of next year. Between that, the potential for a Forza Motorsport, probably a little bit far out. Probably not going to happen. But there's potential for that. Codemasters is due for something next year, whether that's Dirt or Grid. I would imagine Dirt Rally specifically, or Grid. I would imagine that something's going to happen there. Maybe one, maybe both. I don't know. Between all of those, I mean, Gran Turismo. Any year in which a Gran Turismo release is going to be huge. And yeah, I imagine there are things we haven't heard about. I mean, who knows where Criterion is with their Need for Speed game. On second thought, that might actually be a 2022 thing as well. But I really do think it could be a big year. I feel like the racing genre kind of works in these stages where what was it, like 2017, where we had GT Sport, Forza 7, Project Cars 2. Like, those were heavy hitters that year.
Yeah.
Dirt 4, I think, as well, was 2017, if I recall correctly. I think between those games, like, you're not going to get a year like that every year. It's going to take a year like 2017 happens every 3 or 4, right? But I feel like we're coming up on that now. So there's a good chance that 2021 is going to be a good one. And just have to wait and see. Maybe Ridge Racer 8. Who knows? Anything can happen.
Yeah, I think even if we look a bit outside the box, surely Nintendo stop wringing Mario Kart 8 dry at some point soon and show off another Mario Kart. So could we potentially have that announced on the kind of more fantasy racer side of things? There's always rumours of a Diddy Kong Racing remake as well, so maybe that's something that might happen just based on some rumours. Really, like you're saying, like 2021 could shape up to be an absolute belter because we're going to have, like, the way it tends to work, I think, with games is, in F1 2020's case, you have perfected the formula, and then the kind of follow-up game, what usually happens is it's like the absolute, the extra 1% that makes it totally fantastic. Ideally, this is what's going to happen with Formula 1, so that'll be exciting. Codemasters, like you said, could be Grid, Dirt Rally, both. And then there'll be the surprises along the way that we don't quite see yet. WRC 10 as well will be the final game, I think.
Oh yeah, they got one more, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one more or two. I think it might be one though. Like, I can imagine Kyle Latour will want to go out on a high on that purely because there's no way I think they just totally duck out of the rally game making business because they've got it right too much in the past 2 years to drop it. So I wonder if we'll start to see a little bit of what their rally series becomes once the WRC license is passed over. I think 2021 is going to be a great year, and I think, and this goes for pretty much everything, not just racing games, but a little bit of optimism isn't too bad right now. So even if it's just in our tiny subgenre of gaming, I think knowing that there could be games out there that scratch that itch that just haven't been reached yet as far as your favourite racing games go, that's something to get hyped about in 2021. And personally, I can't wait to see what's up ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am wondering, there is a part of me that wonders if, like, Sony feels the need to have something kind of, well, I mean, if Gran Turismo's coming out, they don't need this, but that was kind of the big appeal of Drive Club, right, too? Exactly, was that, like, yeah. It was sort of a B racing franchise for Sony, and Sony always had a form of that, whether it was, you know, something totally not realistic at all, like Wipeout, or Drive Club, or the WRC games, or when they had F1. It would be great to see some more investment from the first parties in racing games, but that's a conversation for a future.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, I'm just excited to see what type of racing games we get that we're not even aware of yet. I think Gran Turismo 7 is obviously the biggest hitter next year, assuming it comes out. Because everybody stands and takes notice when Gran Turismo arrives. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like sport where it's a different direction, or if it's another entry in the mainline series, or in the case of 7, perhaps it kind of ticks both those boxes. When Gran Turismo appears, that's when things hot up. So I'm really excited to see what Polyphony have got cooking, because even if it is just sport with the kind of career mode sprinkled on top, I'll be happy with that. But Polyphony always find a way to put something in there that you don't see coming, whether that be driving on the moon, totally binning the old kind of car PG way of things in sport. They always have something that makes you go, oh, so this is the direction they're thinking of going in. So I can't wait to see what it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. So with that, guess we'll end it. And, at the end of the show, last show of 2020, we'll say that this year obviously has been terrible. But one of the great things, the few, flashes of light in this awful, dreary year is just being able to still do this. Luckily, Time Extend is the kind of thing that can exist no matter what happens in the world, because, Brendan and I, everybody started doing podcasts this year. It's like we've been doing podcasts online forever. Like, get on our level. But no, it's obviously something we can keep doing, and it's something we want to keep doing because of all of you listening, or even if you're listening to this, obviously you listen, but the people who don't listen and like just follow the shit posts on Twitter, the people who participated in TG, all the people who participated in Racing Madness, like, it's because of all of you that, we want to keep doing this. So the Time Extend community Discord, obviously, huge shout out. Just thank you. Thank you for given us something to look forward to. Thank you for giving us something to want to keep driving forward. I think we would continue to do these shows if we had no audience, but it would be hard at a certain point. But knowing that people enjoy chatting about racing games in this way, in sharing their opinions, having those opinions kind of used for podcast fodder, and just being able to reflect on everything together, whether that's through social media or whatnot, is just really great. And I'm just really happy for it. I know that was a big jumbled mess of words that probably didn't make any sense, but the crux of all of it is just thank you. Thank you for everything, all the, any kind of way in which you interacted with us. Thank you.
Yeah, and I totally echo those sentiments. Like you said, we could talk about racing games forever. The racing games that we've talked about more so in recent kind of episodes, as in like the past 10 or 15, a lot of these topics come up because we see what everyone else is interested in, and it opens our eyes to that topic in the sense that we didn't think people might be interested in hearing about that. Now we know people are. Let's talk about it. And that's really what kind of inspires the episodes to keep going. And even on the guest front as well, we've had some phenomenal guests this year. And we've discussed some amazing topics and put together some of my personal favourite episodes, and I'm sure yours as well, Adam. So it's basically just a case of like Time Extend is obviously going to be around in 2021, and it's just really up to us now to try and get through the mini topics that we often reference here and say will probably be in an upcoming episode and never actually materialise. Those will be there, and yeah, once again, just thank you everybody for everything you've done. I think the most exciting part for me is seeing all the natural discussion that happens like in the Discord and on Twitter, because it shows that we're not really after just people responding to tweets for the sake of it. Like we do want to kind of encourage that good conversation. It's in the bio as well. We see ourselves as a positive racing game podcast, even though my personal Twitter is just me shouting about football all the time in a negative way. On the Time Extend account, there's negativity everywhere just now. Like in the video game genre, especially in the past 2 weeks with Cyberpunk coming out. In the racing genre, it feels a bit tribal at times, but we like to think like when we make Time Extend episodes, we want to kind of isolate from that side of things. We know V Rally is the ultimate series, so there's no point coming after it.
Deep cut. You're going back like 20 episodes, I feel like.
Exactly, that's it. But no, I'll stop rambling as well. It's amazing we nearly get through this entire episode though without mentioning the fact that even though this has been a horrendous year and pretty much every plan did not actually happen, we did actually manage to meet in person this year, Adam. And once again, that's one of those things where we would have probably met each other anyway. But I feel as if because Time Extend was becoming somewhat much more apparent, we had the guys in Sega kind of in contact with us and that type of thing. That is one thing that even though it was so far early in the year, like that was just a phenomenal time.
Yeah, everything that 2020 was going to be didn't pan out except for that. And if it had happened a week later, it couldn't probably have happened a week later. That was pretty much like the last thing I did. I remember, landed back in New York, and then within like 4 or 5 days, that was like the moment where there was that day, it might have been March 11th or something like that, or the 12th, but like a couple days after I got back, the world just stopped. That was the day. And I felt like that was the case everywhere. Like it was the case here.
Yeah,
it was the case in the UK. And yeah, just thank God we did it when we did it. Because it was one of the things I can really look back on and say like that was awesome, and it's got me really excited to come back again and rent another apartment in Glasgow where we'll drink a bunch of Mad Dog and play play Enthusia, because that's probably what has to happen next time.
Yeah, definitely. Like, just when you mentioned like Enthusia there, like my mind immediately went back to recording that reaction to the intro and stuff, and like it was just such a good time. And despite 2020 being a bit of a write-off, I would say that if you've had that one experience that happened this year that did make you feel like incredibly happy and it could have only happened this year, then try and think about that and not too much on the negative side of things, because really none of us can influence what is actually going on just now aside from doing our bit. So just keep playing those racing games, enjoying yourself, keeping you and others around you safe, and that's it. Like the good times will come back again. We'll have Enthusia too, whatever it entails. Those good times will come back.
You've said it perfectly, and the one thing I will add to that is that next episode is episode 50. So January's gonna be a time, man. Something's gonna happen. I don't even really know what it is yet, but we'll figure it out.
January might be the anniversary of the entire pod as well.
Yeah, I think that would be the 3-year anniversary.
Jeez.
I think we started beginning of 2018. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I think so. Interesting. Well, we're giving nothing away. We need to kind of squirrel on in the background and work out the plans, because we have many of them. It's just a case of putting it in action.
Yeah. I think we will. I think between both of us, we've got some good ideas. So look forward to that. And hey, if they're not good, I'm sure that they'll be, something along the lines of your excellent shit posting that, we can just look back on and just laugh about. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, again, everyone, thank you so much. Enjoy the holidays to the best that you can. Have a safe holiday. Have a happy new year, and you will hear from us in 2021.
Thanks for listening, guys. Have a fantastic festive period.